The literal unverifiability of such quasi recognition is, nevertheless, in the last analysis beyond question. If I say the green presented by that grass now is the same as the green presented by it at a certain past moment, I cannot truly verify that statement because I cannot revive that past moment. The statement therefore constitutes an arbitrary and supreme decree. But a decree, simply because it is arbitrary, is not therefore necessarily haphazard. My quasi-identifications are influenced. I do not feel equally inclined to identify the color presented by the grass now with the color presented by a cherry a moment ago, though such a decree if made would be equally supreme and unchallengeable on strict grounds. We are all much in the same position of absolute but sane monarchs. Our pronouncements are law, but we use our heads in making them. A Study of Qualities, p. 17, cf. The Structure of Appearance, 2nd ed. p. 134. Nelson Goodman 1906–1998 was a titan of 20th-century American analytic philosophy, best known for his new riddle of induction and his revolutionary work in aesthetics. In his book Fact, Fiction, and Forecast 1955, he introduced the famous Grue paradox to show that inductive reasoning, the process of using past observations to predict the future, depends on the specific language and projectable predicates we use rather than just logic alone. Beyond logic, he transformed the philosophy of art in Languages of Art 1968, arguing that art is a cognitive process and a form of world-making rather than just a matter of feeling or beauty. He famously suggested that instead of asking what is art, we should ask when is art, positing that objects become art when they function as certain types of symbols. A staunch nominalist and relativist, Goodman's philosophy emphasizes that we do not find a ready-made world but rather make multiple valid versions of it through different symbol systems, including science, art, and everyday language. Born in Somerville, Massachusetts, to a Jewish family in 1906, Nelson Goodman's early path was as much defined by the art world as it was by academia. Though he graduated magna cum laude from Harvard in 1928, his doctoral studies were significantly delayed, partly due to the lack of graduate fellowships available to Jewish students at the time and partly by his deep involvement in the Boston art scene. For over a decade, 1929 to 1941, he owned and operated the Walker Goodman Art Gallery in Copley Square, an experience that provided him with a practical, on-the-ground understanding of art that would later fuel his revolutionary theories on aesthetics. It wasn't until 1941 that he finally completed his PhD under C.I. Lewis. Shortly after, his academic trajectory was interrupted by World War II, during which he served as a psychologist in the U.S. Army before finally beginning his influential teaching career at the University of Pennsylvania in 1946. My title, The Fabrication of Facts, has the virtue not only of indicating pretty clearly what I am going to discuss but also of irritating those fundamentalists who know very well that facts are found, not matter, that facts constitute the one and only real world, and that knowledge consists of believing the facts. These articles of faith so firmly possess most of us, they so bind and blind us, that fabrication of fact has a paradoxical sound. Fabrication has become a synonym for falsehood or fiction as contrasted with truth or fact. Of course, we must distinguish falsehood and fiction from truth and fact, but we cannot, I am sure, do it on ground that fiction is fabricated and fact found. 91. Nelson Goodman, Ways of World Making. 1940. The Calculus of Individuals and Its Uses with Henry S. Leonard, Journal of Symbolic Logic, Volume 5. This foundational paper introduced the mereological calculus of individuals, a part-whole theory as an alternative to set theory, laying essential groundwork for Goodman's nominalist project by treating individuals, including scattered or overlapping ones, without abstract entities. 1946. A Query on Confirmation. The Journal of Philosophy, Volume 43, Number 14, an early short piece questioning aspects of confirmation theory, probing how evidence supports hypotheses and foreshadowing Goodman's later critiques of purely syntactical approaches to induction and confirmation, e.g. linking to challenges faced by Hempel. 1947 with W. V. O'Quine, Steps Toward a Constructive Nominalism, Journal of Symbolic Logic, Volume 12, a landmark collaborative paper rejecting abstract entities, classes, numbers, properties, and proposing nominalistic reductions using predicates and mereology. It also discusses a finitistic syntax for mathematics and influenced Goodman's mature nominalism. 1947 on Infirmities of Confirmation Theory, Philosophy and Phenomenological Research, Volume 8, a critique highlighting weaknesses in existing confirmation theories, building on his 1946 query and contributing to the development of his views on projectability and the inadequacies of formal inductive logic. 1949 on Likeness of Meaning Analysis, Volume 10, this influential article proposed a purely extensional analysis of synonymy or likeness of meaning, arguing that no two distinct expressions are fully synonymous, which challenged traditional notions of meaning and influenced debates on analyticity later tied to Quine's two dogmas. 1953 on Some Differences About Meaning Analysis, Volume 13, a follow-up to his 1949 paper, Refining the Extensional Approach to Meaning and Addressing Responses Critiques, further developing his ideas on semantic similarity without intentional commitments. 1956 A World of Individuals in the Problem of Universals, a Symposium, University of Notre Dame Press, an essay defending nominalism by arguing for a world composed solely of individuals via mereology, rejecting universals and abstract entities, reprinted in Problems and Projects. 1958 On Relations That Generate Philosophical Studies, Volume 9, a brief technical note on relations in formal systems, contributing to Goodman's ongoing work in logic and constructional systems. Reconceptions in Philosophy and Other Arts and Sciences 1988, with Catherine Elgin. This was his final major book, summarizing and extending his views on rightness over truth and the cognitive value of art. A Study of Qualities 1990, while this was technically his 1941 PhD dissertation, it was published as a book for the first time in 1990 Garland Publishing. It offers a look at the origins of his nominalist system. Changing the Subject 1992, with Catherine Elgin, originally appearing in the Journal of Aesthetics and Art Criticism 1987, it was reprinted and widely cited in the 90s as a definitive summary of his aesthetic shift, arguing that aesthetics should focus on symbols and understanding rather than just beauty. How Classification Works 1992, a contribution to the volume How Classification Works, Nelson Goodman Among the Social Sciences, which explored the practical application of his world-making theories to social structures. Between the Correct and the Right 1993, an essay that further clarified his distinction between correct representation and the broader concept of rightness in world-making. A Note on Copies 1996, one of his very last short technical notes, dealing with the nature of reproduction in art. L'Art and Theory et en Action 1996, a French collection that included many of his updated thoughts on the Goodman effect. Sprachende Kunst 1997, a new, definitive German translation of Languages of Art, which Goodman helped supervise shortly before his death. Nelson Goodman died on November 25, 1998, in Needham, Massachusetts, at the age of 92. In the months leading up to his death, he suffered a stroke that limited his mobility, though he remained intellectually active and sharp until his final days. Even at 92, he was reportedly preparing to travel to an international conference to deliver a paper just days before he passed away. He was preceded in death by his wife and longtime collaborator, the artist Catherine Sturgis, in 1996. Following his death, he was buried at a family gravesite in Everett, Massachusetts, leaving behind a massive legacy in analytic philosophy and the founding of Harvard's Project Zero. The catch here, as Ernest Gombrich insists, is that there is no innocent I. The I comes always ancient to its work, obsessed by its own past and by old and new insinuations of the ear, nose, tongue, fingers, heart, and brain. It functions not as an instrument self-powered and alone, but as a dutiful member of a complex and capricious organism. Not only how but what it sees is regulated by need and prejudice. It selects, rejects, organizes, discriminates, associates, classifies, analyses, constructs. It does not so much mirror as take and make, and what it takes and makes it sees not bear, as items without attributes, but as things, as food, as people, as enemies, as stars, as weapons. Nothing is seen nakedly or naked. Nelson Goodman. Notes. Nelson Goodman, The Calculus of Individuals in its Different Versions, Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. John K. Roth, Christina J. Moose, Rowena Wilden eds, World Philosophers and Their Works, Freud, Sigmund, Oakeshott, Michael, Salem Press, 2000, p. 735. Daniel Konitz and Marcus Rosberg, Nelson Goodman, Routledge 2014, p. 6. Goodman dies. Harvard University Gazette. Archived from the original on June 14, 2013. Retrieved January 18, 2014. Gardner, Howard 2000. Project Zero, Nelson Goodman's Legacy in Arts Education. The Journal of Aesthetics and Art Criticism. 58-3, 245-249. doi 10.2307 432107. ISSN 0021-8529. JSTOR 432107. Konitz, Daniel, Rosberg, Marcus 2022, Nelson Goodman, Inzalta, Edward N. ed. The Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy Summer 2022 ed. Metaphysics Research Lab, Stanford University, retrieved June 5, 2023. Gardner, H., and Perkins, D. The Mark of Zero, Project Zero's Identity Revealed. HGSE Alumni Bulletin, December 1994, 39-1, 2-6. Konitz and Rosberg 2003, ch. 5. Wertheimer, Roger July 1972. Review of Problems and Projects by Nelson Goodman. Commentary. Nehamaz, Alexander 1984. Review of Mind and Other Matters by Nelson Goodman. The Journal of Aesthetics and Art Criticism. 43-2. JSTOR, 209-211. doi 10.2307 429995. ISSN 0021-8529. JSTOR 429995. An International Bibliography of Works by and Selected Works about Nelson Goodman. Homepages.inf.ed.ac.uk. Retrieved September 17, 2019. References. Casati, R., and Varzi, A. 1999. Parts and Places, The Structures of Spatial Representation. MIT Press. Konitz, Daniel, and Rosberg, Marcus, 2003. Nelson Goodman. Chesham, Acumen and Montreal, McGill Queen S. University Press. Gardner, H., and Perkins, D. The Mark of Zero, Project Zero's Identity Revealed. HGSE Alumni Bulletin, December 1994 39-1, 2-6. Schottenkirk, Dina, 2009. Nominalism and Its Aftermath, The Philosophy of Nelson Goodman. Synthese Library, Volume 343. Springer, ISBN 978-1-4020-9934. Simons, Peter, 1987. Parts, A Study in Ontology. Oxford University Press.